Do you think Skirk is a scam and just the Nevilette support? No, but I do think that Skirk is a good Nevilette. Like a strong character in Nevilette themes. I don't understand, does Skirk actually get a nerf? Yes. It's a pretty big nerf, but most of the TC I've done so far doesn't account for the mechanic that was previously there that got removed, right? Yeah, the counts are all the same. And, like, technically you can still do Serpent Solely carryover, but it's a bit... It's just a lot... It's something you have to actively decide to do. Kind of like building your energy back for the next chamber. Instead of being something that just happens by itself. I think it doesn't work? What do you mean it doesn't work? I saw a screenshot saying hold E doesn't carry over. Oh, if hold E doesn't carry over, it's even more of a nerf. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh, that's cooked. Is Skirk still the second strongest? It never has been. I think even with Serpent Soul to carry over, she's not better than Nevilette. Like, her teams do more DPS than Nevilette, but she's not better. Because Nevilette is Nevilette. What's her current place? Okay, if hold E doesn't carry over either, she's kind of weird, because, like, you have Nevilette and Maoika that are pretty easily the best two carries. Let me move chat back. Alright. And then you've got the other strong carries that are just below, which is Verissa, Alikino, and I think she's definitely in the top 5. The question is, where does she rank compared to these two? And I think the main thing about all of this is that Verissa's power depends a lot on your 4-star constellations on Yansan and Chivalrous. But if you have them, she's definitely, like, at least right now, I think she's pretty comfortably number 3. I think she's comfortably better than Arlecchino if you have C6 Yansan and C6 Chivalrous. Skirk is very dependent on Escoffier, and honestly pretty dependent on Farina too. But if you have them, I think she'll be competitive with Verissa. And then Arlecchino is a lot less reliant on what supports you have and what constellation your 4-stars are. But in exchange, she's a bit weaker if everything is, like, maxed out. I think you can make a fair argument for any of the 3 being number 3 right now. Obviously, this is before we get any testing on Skirk, so... But yeah. Where does her DPS stand compared to Nevilette, Maoika, and Verissa? It's... Her DPS and her best teams are similar to Verissa's DPS and her best teams. Yeah, the fact that Nevilette and Skirk teams overlap is a pretty big downside for Skirk, though. Right, like, if you're making Skirk's best team, it means you have most of the units, if not all of the units, available to make Nevilette's best team, too. And if you already have Nevilette, then in a lot of content, Nevilette will be better than Skirk, so Skirk is gonna get benched half the time. How much lower is she without Farina? From what I've calced, it seems like the gap between having Farina and not having her for Skirk is pretty similar to the gap between having your constellations on your 4-stars and not having them on Verissa. It's pretty much like not having Escoffier. Well, having only Escoffier is better than having only Farina for Skirk. But missing either of them is impactful to her team DPS. Wasn't Farina list like 2% damage loss? No. It was the difference between not having Escoffier. Like, it was a difference, assuming you don't have Escoffier, between the Farina and the non-Farina teams, right? If you have Escoffier, but you don't have Farina, Escoffier isn't as valuable. She's still your best option, but the gap between the Escoffier and the non-Escoffier teams is a lot smaller if you don't have Farina. Basically, having only Escoffier is 80%, having only Farina is like 70%, and having neither of them is like 68%. Which is barely worse than having only Farina. So having only Farina pretty much doesn't help your Skirk at all. Whereas having only Escoffier does. But if you have Escoffier, getting Farina is a pretty noticeable upgrade. So you basically need two of the best characters in the game for Skirk to be a top 5 DPS. Yeah. But like a lot of the characters that are good are like that, you know? Like Nebula has a lot more flexibility, and that paired with how easy he is to play and how good his AoE is why I consider him to be the best carry, despite his team DPS being noticeably lower than a character like Malika. And Arlecchino's relative flexibility in her teams is also why I consider her to be on a similar level to Veresa, despite noticeably lower team DPS. True and real, but unfortunately, he's boring. Okay, Nevedet got a lot less boring for me once I got Escoffier, because I get to gamble for the goose on the loose. And like, it sounds dumb, but I actually have a lot more fun just because of the 1 out of 3 goose on the loose. One thing I never understood was how Malika isn't just better than Farina and Nevedet's premium teams. Isn't the Draconic stack some damage bonus and more sub DPS better? More sub DPS? I think you're underestimating Farina's damage in Nevedet's teams. Instructor TTDS Nevedet doesn't count. I refuse to count that one. I'm sorry. The highest simmed one for no Farina with Nevedet runs Fav Petra Malika. And I think that tells you all you need to know about Malika's damage contribution in these teams. Alright, in the... We can look at one that does have Malika and Farina. But you can see, like, Farina does a lot more for your team damage than Malika does. Is there no sim for Nevedet BMX? There is. But I don't want to think about this one. I don't want to think about that one. I thought some vapes would make it better. It's not enough. Vapes are a lot worse than melts, and those teams don't run any attack buffs. And Farina does a lot of damage in Nevedet teams. But also, and I think this is something people tend to forget a lot, Nevedet is burst reliant, and solo Hydro Nevedet is a little, yeah. Right? Let's look at ER requirements, right? So, I'll probably still have a sheet open. This one? No. Surely I can find an ER sheet somewhere. Surely there we go. We have one. Okay. So, assuming he catches his own particles, which already kind of sucks to have to do because it means you have to either book or wait for the particles from your first skill. But whatever, sure. Right? If you do something like Kazuha, Shilona, and Malika, right? Your ER requirements are gonna hover around 146. That's with double Fav. 1 Fav, 158. If instead of Malika, you run Farina, this 158 becomes 120. It's like 40% ER. People just often tend to forget that double Hydro is good for Nevedet, not just because of the Hydro resonance and because Farina does damage, but also because Farina generates a good amount of particles that Nevedet catches. Do you think Skirk is a scam and just the Nevedet support? No, but I do think that Skirk is a good Nevedet. Like a strong character in Nevedet teams. Because her biggest downside as a carry is pretty poor AoE. But if you use her as a burst support for Nevedet, Nevedet has AoE, and her burst AoE is actually good. Right? Her AoE is bad on normal attacks, not on burst. Is it like Arlecchino's? Kind of. But she's not allowed to run animal units. In AoE content, you can play Monopyro Arlecchino. Or even Melt. and use groupers. Skirk can't. I have a Skirk build with 100% crit rate. Should I get her Sig and be 120%? Or what's a better alternative? Her Skirk is far enough ahead of the other options that your best bet is probably to get Sig and change your build. Go a different set or something. Let's say her Skirk. I meant her Sig. You know what I meant. If you have a really good build that's at around 100% crit rate already, C1 is going to be a lot more helpful than Sig. Do we have any information on what the 4-stars are going to be? Does Honejika have any banner info? Barely any. Oh, there's a Shenhe rerun. Oh, this is gonna be the biggest bait, man. People pulling Shenhe to get their team situationally 1% better. Oh no. Oh no.